previous video, I showed you this particular case and I explained that I was going to use this case to build a server. I explained why I chose the case, why I chose the parts, and I'm going to go over a lot of that. And I'm going to do the build. I didn't do the build. I was just trying to explain the hows, whys, the whats, and all of that. I'll go over real quick again why I chose this case. The case has plenty of space for up to 10 drives. It could house up to 12 if I wanted. It has lots of ventilation, so these are some of the things. I had this case, which is also an important consideration. So you're saving money by trying to reuse parts, keep stuff out of the landfill. I already had this motherboard that had the CPU, so we've got an old Asus motherboard with an AMD Phenom 955 processor, more than enough for this server. I have 16 gigabytes of RAM that I've already installed. I already installed a case fan at the top, the front, the bottom, and the back. So in the previous video I mentioned that this is going to be a server, but this server won't run 24 hours because it's a backup server. So my initial thoughts are it probably will never reach the same capacity and drives as the other server, but I'm going to use it as a backup to the server. So it's going to be a backup to my backup, and it'll only back up the most important things, so it probably won't ever reach the same capacity. But I chose this case because it could. So we're going to do the build. So I'll explain again why I chose some of these parts, like I just explained the case. I'm going to fire up my camera here. There we go. So you can see me doing the build. I'll switch back and forth. So here you can see the case. It's wide open. It's not quite as big as the other case, so cable management won't be as clean. I try to be reasonable, but I also don't want to waste a lot of time and try too hard to make it look great. I'm mostly concerned with trying to minimize the amount of cabling that is restricting airflow. So as I mentioned in the other video, you want to use at a minimum of an 80 plus power supply. The reason is they're more efficient, so it's not going to waste as much electricity, and this is doubly important if you're going to be using your server is going to be running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now this server is only going to be fired up once a week probably, so I'm using an 80 plus. The other server uses an 80 plus gold. I would recommend, if it's going to run 24/7, go with an 80 plus gold because it's even more efficient, probably a little bit better built, and it's going to save you on electricity long term. So you're not saving by buying cheaper power supply. You're increasing your risk of failure, and it's costing you long term if your computer or server is running all the time. So let's go ahead and stick that in there. So these things fit really nice, and we'll drop that in. Just want to be careful to get it in. You want to make sure that in this case it's breathing from the bottom and going out the back. Some suck the air out of the case this particular case and is set up to actually suck the air through the bottom and dissipate it so it never enters the case. It's not a good or bad thing, it's just is. In this case, because it has such good ventilation, I'm not concerned at all about having that extra fan to, you know, pull air through. So I think it's just fine. A lot of your PCs make use of that power supply fan, and this one has 120 millimeter or 120 or 140, so it's a nice size fan and it can pull a lot of air through the case. But the power supplies do generate a lot of heat, so this configuration actually helps keep the power supply cooler, which is one of the reasons why they use this type of power supply fan. So there we go, we got her screwed in. Now we want to, before we attach to the motherboard, we want to start our cable management. So we don't want all of this all wrapped up together when we get started. We want to make sure that it's all sorted here, so we're going to be able to properly cable manage everything. So I'm going to get everything over here except for the motherboard connector, and I'm going to put that over there, and then we can go ahead and connect to the motherboard. And this is a 20+4, so there we go, we got that connected. Now this takes a 4-pin. You have different configurations for different PCs, but this one uses a 4-pin CPU, but the power supply here, you can do an 8-pin. A little bit tight. A little bit old. Have to wear my glasses sometimes. Most of the time. So let's get that in there. Try to keep my big paws out of the way so you can see it. That's the right one. Got to get it in there right. We're off to a great start, huh? I know this fits. Finally. So now we want to think about cable management and how we can kind of keep all of this together. As you can see, and we can eliminate some of the hindrance of airflow. So now we've got that. We've got all of our stuff set up. This actually has two 6+2s, so this power supply could run a really nice graphics card. We're going to cable manage this on all the way out on the back side of the case, because we're not going to need it. But it's a good newer power supply. So we have 3 plus 3 SATA ports. If we need, we can run some adapters off of these Molexes, or we can split these to get more ports. So I'll show you what that can look like. If we want to go more than 6, then what we would do is, you can do a couple of different ways. You can go off the Molexes, or you can go from 1 to 4. So here we have 3, so the 3 becomes 6. So 6 plus 6 off of the 2 SATAs, this here alone could give you the maximum for this case of 12. There are also some simpler adapters that you can use to grow with, where you can just split a single port. So a single SATA connection becomes 2. So if you don't need a lot of drives, and you just need to, you want to add one more, so you want 7. So this is all you're going to need. Now these also come with Molex attachments, so you could go from a Molex to 2 SATAs. It's just up to you what you want to do, but they have those different kinds of adapters. You have some that are a little bit longer, so have a lot of ways that you can adapt to the case. So here we go. We got that connected. We're going to need our graphics card, so we're going to put in Quadro 400. In the other video I mentioned, the Quadro 400 is a cheap and, more importantly, low power card. So this low power card only consumes, I believe, 32 watts max. So it's not going to use a lot of power, and if your server is running a lot, that's very important. If it's not running a lot, then it's still a cheap card that does everything you need to do for this particular use case. So there we go. Now the other thing I mentioned in my other video was the fact that I wanted to put a second Ethernet port. So we have this PCI E gigabit Ethernet card. So we're going to put that in so that we can connect to 2 networks, and we can keep, you know, people in or out on, have an extra, you know, set of rules for the second network if we want. So we're going to put that in here, and we have 2 gigabit Ethernet ports now. One of the other things that I had mentioned is, if we ever decide to add more SATA drives in here, we have this adapter, and this adapter is a PCIe that has 4 SATA ports. So we can plug this one in, and we get 4 more. Now they have them with 6 or 8 SATA ports. but I'm going to go with 4 because, as I mentioned, I have the 12 drives in my main server, but I'm probably never going to get to 12. And the 6 ports on the main motherboard here, plus the 4 ports I added, equals the 6 3.5-inch bays, and if I use adapters, the 4 5.25-inch bays. So that gives me 10 drives, which is, I can't see going over that. I could in the future if I wanted, but that's we're looking at right now a maximum of 10. I can't see going over that right now. So now we got it set up for 10. I'm not going to put all of the drives in today, but I just wanted to show you that, and we will put in a couple of drives today so you can see how it all works. Let's secure those. So we're going to secure the cards. Don't want them wiggling around on us. Gotta keep them where they belong. It probably wouldn't just come out, but the problem is when you're like plugging the cables in or something like that, if it gets a little sticky or something, then that might become a problem. So the last one is going to be held in by this screw. So we're going to put that back on, and it's going to be held in by the screw that holds in this. There we go. Now we got the back on. Now, as I mentioned, we already have the SSD in there right here. So I'll tip that up. You can get a quick look at that. So there she is. We got the SSD in there. Already in. So let's drop a hard drive in. Now we've got quite a selection of hard drives here. The first one I'm going to put in is going to be a Seagate Barracuda 1 terabyte drive. Why the Seagate Barracuda 1 terabyte? As I mentioned, my main drive that I use to store everything on, not the operating system, but to store my main files that I currently work on, I store on a 1 terabyte drive. And I like to have as many as possible backups of that specific drive. So the first one we're going to put in is my most important drive. So we're going to drop in that drive. So here we go. I'm dropping my favorite drive. Now these aren't made exactly for popping in these kinds of drives, but it works, and so we're going to let it work. So we'll only be putting in one screw on each side of the drive. Normally I'd probably prefer more, but this is actually good enough. It's even just one screw, it's very solid. Just get it tight, but not too tight. So there, we got that in there. We need to go to the other side, pop in the second screw, because we do not want that thing vibrating. It's our most important drive. And we have multiple backups of it, so it's probably not a problem, but the vibrations would, you know, shorten the life of the drive. We don't want to waste a good drive. So let's just make sure we got that thing nice and tight in there. Now, while we're here, as I mentioned, this is not going to be used. This is a 6+2 by 2 if we wanted to add graphics cards in here. We're not going to need those. So we're just going to do a quick bit of cable management while we're here. And we're going to make sure they stay here on the back and they don't get in the way. We're going to use a little bit bigger tie. I usually can get away with those smaller ones, but got this extra little bit of cord here, so open up a little more space. There we go. That should stay back there nicely. Yeah. So let's flip it back over. Take a look at what we got. So I'm going to show you something else I like to do that avoids confusion in my builds, and that is on the SATA 1 port, I like to run a red SATA cable to my SSD or whatever my main drive is, which almost always, of course, on newer systems, it's a SATA. I mean, it's a SSD. So that runs there. Now, I already have a DVD drive in here. Chances are I will never use it. I'm not going to take it out at this point because I don't know when or if I will ever fill this thing up. If I do, that'll come out. But it's, as you see, it's got a black cord. So the new drive is going to get a black cord. Now at times you're going to need to use straight on both sides, but generally speaking, I'm going to use the 90-degree angles. So the next one is you need to go to the second port. Some of them go, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you'll want to look beside the ports. They're numbered. So it just depends on the board. On this one, they have it numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to put our SATA in there. And then you need to think about cable management in advance here. which way you want to go, whatever you think is going to work better as far as connecting these, the power here. So for example, you see here kind of like that. It's not necessarily bad, but it's not as good. In this case, it would be better to go here, here with the next one, and then here with the next one like that. So as you can see, that's going to be a lot better. You can see they're all turned up in the right direction, the same direction as this one. That's going to be better. So a little bit of cable management in advance just saves you some grief later. So there you go. You've got the first drive in, and all we have to do is repeat that process. We just go down the line and we just drop all of our drives, however many that we want in the case. Later you can buy adapters, as I said, if you want to convert these 5 1/4 inch bays, and there you go. So the other consideration, as I mentioned a few times, is the cable management. So as you finish, like for example, these two cables will have nothing to do with this side of the PC. So we're going to want to try to, minimize any obstruction of this bottom fan, and prevent any obstruction of the flow through the case. Minimize it as much as we can. Different ways to do it. We could try to set it down like that, out of the way. We could set this one down the same way, out of the way, try to get it out, like that. We might want to, snake it over here and tie it down like that, just so we're leaving as much space open here as possible. And then with these cables, we'll try to tie them together and maybe lay them down also to the back side like so, and that way the main body of the case is open so that the air can flow. It's not going to be obstructed and slow it down, and it breaks up the pattern of air, so it's diffused, so it just doesn't have the same beneficial flow. So that's about it for today. Hope this has been useful for you, and if you have any questions, want to see something similar, then please leave us some comments. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, welcome your suggestions on other kinds of builds. We're actually going to be working on medium duty gamer build on a budget. Now the card is kind of a budget card, but it's a $400 RTX 2060. So $400 for some people is going to be cheap, and some people it's not going to be cheap. The RTX 2060 is not a high-end gaming card, but it is a capable gaming card for most games. So it can run just about any game out there without any problems, though not all of them are going to be able to run on high settings, and certainly not on 4K or anything like that. But if you want to run 1080p, you'll be able to run anything on it. And so that's our focus, is just a 1080p gaming system where you're getting good frame rates, and the total cost of the system is fairly reasonable, and the system is going to serve a dual purpose, that it will allow you to do business, open business documents, homework for students, and just about anything you could imagine using a PC for. Streaming, it's going to have 32 gigabytes of RAM. That's not that much in these days, but a lot of PCs for gaming will stop at 16 gigabytes because very few games will ever use more than that, or at least they don't use it now. But we're going to drop in 32. So if you want to do video encoding, you want to do streaming and things like that, you don't want the game to suck up all of the resources and leave you not without enough to do other things. And now some of that is CPU and graphics card dependent, especially CPU. And we are using a little bit older CPU, but it is going to be a 6-core, 12-thread CPU. I think in most cases, streaming 1080p is going to be no problem. So stay tuned for that build. Thanks for watching and have a good day.